The air on the 38th floor of the Shen Corporation Tower was different. It wasn't just the recycled, climate-controlled chill. It was thinner, sharper, tasting of ambition and expensive cologne. She stood on a plush grey carpet that swallowed the sound of her own nervous breathing, her gaze fixed on the imposing double doors of frosted glass. CEO's office. The minimalist silver plaque declared, right on schedule, she thought, her internal narrator kicking in with the dry, detached tone she'd come to associate with her condition. Scene 3. The unwanted arrival. The setting is perfect. A sterile, high-tech fortress designed to intimidate. The protagonist, that's me. The plot device is appropriately out of place. She smoothed down the front of her simple, beige dress for the 10th time. It was the nicest thing she owned. A purchase made specifically for this role. It was a costume, nothing more. A uniform for the character she was about to play. The disposable secretary. According to the narrative blueprint her mind had so helpfully constructed. Her purpose was brief and thankless. She was the catalyst. The clumsy pawn meant to be swept aside to make way for the real female lead. Her diagnosis of delusional disorder felt less like a medical condition and more like being given a peek at the script. It was a curse and a strange, secret comfort. She. Dear. Don't look so nervous. A warm, perfumed cloud enveloped her as a woman with impeccably coiffed hair and a Chanel suit the color of a summer dawn placed a reassuring hand on her arm. This was Eleanor Shen, matriarch of the Shen Empire and, more importantly, her mother's lifelong best friend. Enter the benevolent matchmaker, SIAG's inner voice supply. A classic archetype. Her function is to force the meeting that the male lead would otherwise avoid, a human crowbar for the plot. Auntie Eleanor. I'm fine, she said, managing a small, polite smile. It's just very high up. Nonsense. You'll get used to it. Mrs. Shen beamed, her diamonds flashing under the recessed lighting. My Nathan can be a bit prickly. All business, that one. He gets it from his father. But underneath that icy exterior is a good heart. You just have to dig for it. With a pickaxe. Sometimes. She squeezed SIAG's arm conspiratorially before rapping her knuckles sharply on the glass door. The sound was soft, yet it seemed to echo in the cavernous hallway. There was no immediate answer. Mrs. Shen's smile tightened infinitesimally. He's in there. I can feel him ignoring me. She rapped again. Harder this time. Nathaniel Shen, you open this door this instant. Your mother is here. A moment later, one of the doors slid open with a whisper-quiet hiss. The man who stood there was exactly as the narrative demanded. He wasn't just handsome. He was sculpted, as if from ice and granite. His black suit was tailored with such precision it seemed a part of him. His white shirt was stark and pristine, and his silk tie was the color of a stormy sea. But it was his eyes that truly defined him. They were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. They flickered from his mother's exasperated face to Saishi, and in that fleeting glance, she was assessed, categorized, and dismissed. And here he is, Saishi thought, a strange sense of calm settling over her. The male lead, character traits, cold, aloof, emotionally unavailable, ridiculously wealthy. His primary obstacle is his own inability to feel anything until the true female lead appears. My role is to be a minor annoyance that precedes her grand entrance. Mother, Nathan Shen said, his voice a low baritone that was as smooth and cold as the marble floors. I'm in the middle of a conference call. It can wait, Mrs. Shen said, sweeping past him into the office with the unstoppable force of a mother on a mission. She gestured for Saishi to follow. We have something much more important to discuss. Saishi scurried in behind her, her heart performing a nervous little drum solo against her ribs. The office was breathtaking. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a panoramic, godlike view of the sprawling city below. A massive mahogany desk, clear of all clutter save for a sleek laptop and a single, intimidatingly complex phone, dominated the space. It smelled of leather, clean glass, and power. Nathan closed the door, the click of the latch sounding like a final judgment. He leaned back against it, crossing his arms. The posture was casual, but the tension radiating from him could have cracked the glass. His gaze was now fixed solely on Esaishi. "And who is this?" he asked, his tone making it clear he didn't actually care for the answer. "This," his mother announced with a flourish, "is Esaishi. She's Lydia's daughter, and she is your new secretary." A profound silence descended upon the room. Esaishi could feel Nathan's stare intensify, dissecting her beige dress, her sensible flats, her wide, slightly panicked eyes. It was like being examined under a microscope. "The inciting incident," her inner narrator declared. "The false proximity is established. Cue the male lead's predictable rejection." Nathan pushed off the door and walked slowly toward his desk, his movements economical and precise. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at Esaishi. "I already have a secretary. Jessica is perfectly competent. In fact, she's the most efficient assistant I've ever had. Jessica can be reassigned," Mrs. Shen said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "She can help your father. He's always complaining his people are slow. I am not reassigning the best executive assistant in the company on a whim," Nathan stated, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "This is the executive floor of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Mother, not a venue for your matchmaking projects." "This isn't matchmaking, Mrs. Shen protested, though the slight blush on her cheek suggested otherwise. "This is helping out a friend. Lydia is worried about Esaishi. The girl needs a stable job, some structure, a chance to get on her feet, and you," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at her son, "are going to give it to her." Esaishi stood frozen, a silent spectator at her own trial. It was all playing out exactly as it should. The powerful mother, the resistant son, the unwanted girl caught in the middle. She felt a bizarre sense of detachment, as if she were watching a scene from a television drama. Her only job was to stand here and look appropriately meek and overwhelmed. She was acing the role. Nathan finally sat down in his enormous leather chair, the movement a clear signal of his authority. He steepled his fingers, his dark eyes never leaving Esaishi. "With all due respect to you and Aunt Lydia," he began, the politeness in his tone a thin veneer over sheer ice, "my office is not a therapeutic workshop. I require a secretary with a specific skill set, extensive experience in corporate administration, and the ability to anticipate my needs before I have them." "Does she have any of that?" The question hung in the air, directed at his mother, but intended to humiliate Esaishi. Mrs. Shen faltered for a second. "She's a very bright girl. She's a quick learner, and there it is," Esaishi thought. "The confirmation of my uselessness. The cannon fodder character never has relevant skills. Their main purpose is to be incompetent, thus highlighting the supreme competence of the true female lead when she eventually arrives." "I don't have time to teach someone how to do their job," Nathan said flatly. He finally addressed Esaishi directly, his voice sharp and impersonal. "Miss Shi, I appreciate you coming here, but there has been a misunderstanding. There is no position available for you. Jessica will validate your parking on the way out." It was a clean, brutal dismissal, a corporate execution. Esaishi opened her mouth to say, "Thank you. I understand," because that's what her character would do. She would accept her fate and exit stage left. But before she could speak, Mrs. Shen moved. She walked to the front of her son's desk and leaned forward, placing her hands flat on the polished mahogany. Her voice, when she spoke, was no longer light and cheerful. It was low, firm and laced with the steel that had helped her husband build this very empire. Nathaniel, you are going to hire her, she said, enunciating each word with perfect clarity. She is the daughter of my oldest and dearest friend, a woman who was my sister in all but blood, who held my hand through your father's first business failure and celebrated with me at his first success. We made a promise to each other, a long time ago, that we would always look out for each other's children. I am looking out for hers. Now, you will too. She straightened up, her expression unyielding. She will start today. Give her something to do. Answering phones, making coffee, sorting mail, I don't care. But she will have a desk here, and she will be treated with respect. This is not a request. Nathan's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He stared at his mother, a silent battle of wills playing out across the vast expanse of his desk. The air crackled with tension. For a long moment, she thought he might actually refuse, might detonate the entire scene, and send the plot spiraling in an unknown direction. But the bonds of filial piety, or perhaps the fear of his mother's legendary wrath, were stronger. He broke eye contact first, his gaze dropping to the blank screen of his laptop. He let out a long, slow breath, a sound of pure, undiluted frustration. Fine, he bit out. The word was a shard of glass. He pressed a button on his intercom. Jessica, a crisp, female voice responded instantly. Yes, Mr. Shen. There is an empty desk in the outer alcove. Have it cleared and set up with a terminal. Basic access only, he commanded. His eyes flickered back to Shi, cold and assessing. And find something for Miss Shi to do. Start with shredding last year's financial preliminaries. All of them, right away, Mr. Shen. Jessica replied, her voice betraying not a hint of surprise. A menial, pointless task, Shi's narrator noted with satisfaction. Designed to demean and isolate. The narrative is back on track. The male lead has been forced to accept the plot device. But he will make her existence as difficult as possible, Mrs. Shen beamed, the storm clouds of her anger vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. There, see, that wasn't so hard, was it? She turned to Shi, patting her shoulder. You just go with Jessica. Dear, get yourself settled. I'll call you tonight to see how your first day went, with a final, triumphant smile at her son. She swept out of the office, leaving Shi alone with the dragon in his lair. Shi stood in the suffocating silence, her hands clasped in front of her. Nathan did not look at her again. He turned his full attention to his laptop, his fingers beginning to fly across the keyboard with a furious energy. He had already erased her from his conscious thought. She was a piece of furniture now, an unwanted fixture in his perfectly curated world. A moment later, a woman in a sharp pantsuit appeared at the open door. Miss Shi, and Jessica, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your desk. She nodded, turning to leave. But just before she stepped out, she risked one last glance at the man behind the desk. He was completely absorbed in his work, his handsome face set in a grim, unapproachable mask. The stage is set, she thought, a strange sense of resolve washing over her. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't even particularly nervous anymore. She was simply playing her part. The disposable secretary has been installed. Her purpose: to occupy the space until the real story begins. She followed Jessica out into the hallway, the frosted glass doors hissing shut behind her, sealing her fate. The air in Nathan Sterling's office was a manufactured climate of success, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, smelling faintly of expensive leather and ionized, ambition scrubbed air. It was a sterile, silent testament to a man who commanded markets with the same cool detachment he applied to his own environment. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust-free expanse of his obsidian desk and glinting off the chrome legs of his chair. It was a throne room for a modern king, and Nathan, its king, did not look up as Lily entered. Lily pushed the serving cart with the careful reverence of a priestess presenting a sacrifice. The cart's rubber wheels were a whisper on the polished concrete floor, the only sound to challenge the low, almost subliminal hum of the city 30 floors below. On the top tier of the cart sat a single, magnificent silver cloche. This is it, Lily thought, her internal narrator kicking into high gear. Chapter 12. The eccentric secretary's midday gambit. A classic scene where the quirky, a brilliant heroine attempts to break through the male lead's icy exterior with a gesture of unexpected extravagance. It's a test. If he accepts the meal, it signals a subtle shift in their dynamic. If he rejects it, it triggers the requisite humiliation beat, which is a crucial step toward character growth. She smoothed the front of her simple, yet immaculately pressed, pencil skirt. She had dressed for the part today, a study in professional deference that belied the chaotic, drip-filled universe churning inside her mind. Mr. Sterling, she announced, her voice a little brighter than necessary, a deliberate choice to contrast with the office monastic silence. Your lunch is served. Nathan's focus remained locked on the tablet in his hands, his pen making a series of sharp, decisive taps against the screen. A muscle in his jaw worked, the only sign of life in a face that seemed carved from granite. I didn't order lunch, Miss Vance. Of course you didn't, Lily said, positioning the cart beside his desk. Male leads in your tax bracket never order lunch. It simply materializes, a testament to their status and the efficiency of their staff. She lifted the silver cloche with a flourish, revealing the creation beneath. It was, objectively, a salad. But it was a salad in the way a supernova is a flicker of light, a vibrant, architectural marvel of microgreens, edible flowers in jewel tones, translucent slices of heirloom radish, and what appeared to be gold leaf-dusted croutons. At its center, a perfect fan of seared A5 Wagyu rested on a bed of glistening quinoa, drizzled with a sauce that shimmered like liquid onyx. Behold, she said, a tone ground, the Sterling Enterprises Q3 Profit Margin Enhancement Salad, her CEO's specialty. Finally, he looked up. Nathan's eyes, the color of a storm-tossed sea, moved from the absurd creation to her face. There was no curiosity in his gaze, only a flat, analytical assessment, as if he were scanning a document for errors, and he always found them. Profit margin enhancement salad, he repeated, the words tonus, precisely. It's crafted with ingredients known to boost cognitive function and executive decision-making. The ginkgo biloba is infused in the balsamic vinaigrette. The omega-3 south are sourced from sustainable, hand-massaged salmon roe. And the sheer audacity of its price point is meant to reinforce your sense of market dominance. She was rather proud of that last part. It felt authentic to the genre. A long, heavy silence descended. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the expensive leather groaning in protest. He steepled his long fingers beneath his chin, his gaze never leaving hers. He was calculating. She could almost see the numbers scrolling behind his eyes. What is the audacity of its price point, Miss Vance? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. Lily's smile was unwavering, a mask of cheerful competence. Here comes the conflict, the friction that generates the romantic sparks. It's a bespoke culinary experience, Mr. Sterling. The cost reflects the artistry. The number, he clarified, his voice dropping another degree. $1,000, she chirped. The air in the room seemed to crystallize. The distant hum of the city faded into nothingness. Nathan didn't blink. He didn't flinch. A less experienced plot device might have mistaken his stillness for shock. Lily knew better. It was the calm before the storm, a quiet, ice-cold tension of a predator. $1,000, he said again. Not as a question, as a statement of fact he was turning over in his mind, examining its every facet for flaws. For lettuce, it's far more than lettuce, she countered, her practiced confidence beginning to feel a bit thin. It's a narrative investment. Think of the symbolism. Consuming something so outrageously priced without a second thought, it's the ultimate power move. It's what CEOs in romance novels do. Honestly, I'm surprised you haven't done it before. You're usually so stingy. For a billionaire. The last part slipped out. A genuine observation filtered through her fictional lens. His eyes narrowed. Stingy, fiscally conservative, she corrected quickly. Prudent, you recycle your paper clips. You track the office supply budget to the cent. It's a very common trait for the self-made, cold-hearted CEO who secretly has a wound in his past. It makes you seem grounded, despite your immense wealth. He ignored her psychoanalysis. He picked up a slim, silver letter opener, tapping its pointed tip against his desk blotter. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound was a nail being hammered into her composure. Show me the receipt, Miss Vance. The blood in Lily's veins went cold. The receipt. The flimsy, damning piece of paper that would shatter the entire illusion. She had tucked it into her pocket. A real-world artifact that had no place in this carefully constructed scene. Abort. Abort. The plot is veering off script. He's not supposed to care about the details. Only the grand gesture. A receipt is pedestrian. She try, her voice losing its airy quality. It ruins the magic of charging $1,000 salad to the company expense account. His voice was sharp now, cutting through her fantasy like a shard of glass. An account, I'll remind you, that is subject to audits. An account that I personally review. Her carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. The office wasn't a set piece. It was a real place of business. Nathan wasn't a brooding male lead waiting to be charmed. He was her boss, a ruthlessly efficient executive who saw her not as a quirky heroine, but as a liability. Well, she stammered, her mind racing for a new script, a different chapter. It's your company. The money is yours anyway, so you're not really paying for it, are you? It's just moving from one of your pockets to another business's pocket. It's the circle of capitalism. His expression was utterly blank. That is the single most idiotic explanation of corporate finance I have ever heard. The words struck her with physical force. Idiot. He thought she was an idiot, not eccentric, not charmingly unconventional. Just a fool. The humiliation, which she had intellectually prepared for as a plot beat, was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a hot, creeping flush that started in her chest and burned its way up her neck. He leaned forward, the full, intimidating force of his presence washing over her. Let me be clear, Miss Vance. You have taken a company credit card, which is entrusted to you for legitimate business purposes, and you have spent $1,000 on a salad as some sort of performance art. He sees it as a performance. A small, panicked part of her thought. He's close to the truth, but he's missing the point. It's not art. It's plot progression. It was a gesture, she whispered. The confidence completely gone now, replaced by a raw, pleading note she hated. It was theft, he corrected, his voice a blade misappropriation of company funds. Grounds for immediate dismissal. The word echoed in the silent room. Fired. The ultimate rejection. Not just by the male lead, but by reality itself. The carefully built walls of her fantasy world trembled, and the bleak vista of her actual life, the tiny apartment, the mountain of student debt, the diagnosis she ignored threatened to pour in. Her hands, resting on the cart, began to shake. Nathan watched the tremor. His face unreadable, he seemed to be considering his options. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would tell her to pack her things, The romance novel would be over. The disposable secretary, disposed of, then. He made his decision. However, he said, his tone shifting from prosecutorial to judicial. Firing you would require a significant amount of paperwork for HR. It's inefficient. The relief that flooded her was so intense it made her dizzy. Thank you, sir, she breathed. I'm not finished. He cut in, his voice like ice. The company will not be paying for this narrative investment. I will be deducting the full $1,000 from your next paycheck. Lily stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. The world tilted on its axis. $1,000. That was her rent. That was her groceries and her electricity bill for the entire month. The abstract concept of a CEO's wealth, a boundless ocean of money in her stories, had just crashed against the very concrete, very finite reality of her bank account. The beautiful, architectural salad on the cart suddenly looked grotesque, a mocking monument to her own folly. The gold leaf wasn't a symbol of power. It was a flake of her rent money, inedible and worthless. You can't, she said, the words catching in her throat. I can, and I will, he stated, his voice devoid of any pity. Consider it a lesson in the difference between fictional CEOs and actual employers. Now, get that thing out of my office. The smell of it is distracting. He turned back to his tablet as if she had already ceased to exist. The transaction was over. The verdict delivered. Lily stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her, suffocating her. The humiliation was no longer a warm flush. It was a cold, heavy stone in the pit of her stomach. She felt small, foolish, and utterly transparent. He had looked right through her quirky facade, right through the scaffolding of her delusions, and seen only an irresponsible employee, an idiot. With clumsy, trembling hands, she placed the cloche back over the $1,000 mistake. She didn't look at him as she turned the cart around. She focused on the door, a rectangle of escape from this glass-walled cage of judgment. As she pulled the cart out of the office, the wheels squeaking pathetically, she heard him speak one last time, without looking up. And Miss Vance, don't ever call me stingy again. She closed the door behind her with a soft click. The sounds of the outer office rushed back in, the gentle tapping of keyboards, the low murmur of conversation. Several of her colleagues glanced up, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. They had seen her go in with the grand gesture. They were now seeing her return with the invisible cloak of shame. She pushed the cart back toward the kitchenette, her head down, her vision blurring with unused tears. The entire scene replayed in her mind, not as a chapter in a book, but as the mortifying, financially catastrophic event it truly was. He hadn't just rejected her, he had punished her. He had used his power not to create romantic tension, but to inflict real-world hardship. She stopped by her desk, leaning against it for support. All the air had been sucked from her lungs. This wasn't a struggle beat. This was just a struggle. Real, painful, and with a price tag she couldn't afford. Under her breath, so quiet that not even she could be sure she'd said it, she mumbled the only defense she had left, the flimsy, tattered remnant of her story. Stingy, cold-hearted CEO. The air on the 35th floor of Sterling Corporation was thin, crisp, and smelled of successor's sterile, expensive scent of industrial-grade coffee and recycled ambition. Around Lily's minimalist cubicle, however, the atmosphere was thick with a rare and genuine buzz. Mark from acquisitions, a man whose smile was usually reserved for seven-figure deals, was leaning against her partition, looking genuinely impressed. I still can't believe you pulled it off, he said, shaking his head. The Henderson project has been a ghost for 6 months. 3 senior VPs tried and failed. And you, in your first month you just walk in and close it. Sarah from marketing chimed in, a voice a little too loud in the reverential hush of the executive wing. It wasn't just closing a mark. She restructured the terms. Got them to agree to our media clause. Nathan is going to be less furious than usual. That's a win. She beamed at Lily. You're a miracle worker. Lily offered a placid, practiced smile. It was the smile she used for quarterly reports and bland corporate greetings. Inside, her mind was a whirring engine of narrative analysis. They don't understand. This has nothing to do with my competence. I'm merely the instrument of the plot. The Henderson deal was a narrative stumbling block, a tiresome subplot that needed resolving, so the main story could commence. I was activated, deployed, and the obstacle was removed. It wasn't me, it was the story's need for forward momentum. I am, after all, the ultimate plot device. I just got lucky, I guess, she said. Her voice a soft, unassuming murmur. The praise was a gentle wave. But Lily was already bracing for the tsunami she knew was coming. A story doesn't introduce a high-functioning, eccentric secretary to a cold, emotionally unavailable CEO just for her to be good at her job. Her purpose was far grander, far more sacrificial. She was the catalyst, as if summoned by the very laws of storytelling. The polished chrome elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive ding. A young woman stepped out. She wasn't dressed in the severe, dark-hued armor of Sterling's female executives. She wore a simple, cream-colored dress that seemed to catch the light, and her hair was tied back in a way that was practical, but effortlessly elegant. She clutched a leather portfolio to her chest like a shield, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and intimidation as she took in the panoramic view of the cityscape through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At that exact moment, Nathan Sterling emerged from his corner office, a sleek glass fortress at the end of the hall. He moved with a predator's economy of motion, his slate grey suit impeccable, his face a mask of cold neutrality. His path would have taken him directly to the conference room. But he stopped. He stopped dead. His gaze fell on the girl by the elevator. For a fractional second, the mask slipped. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't recognition. It was something more elemental. A subtle flaring of his nostrils, a minute tightening of his jaw. To the untrained eye, he looked irritated, as if a piece of furniture had been moved without his permission. But Lily saw it. She saw everything. Unseen, her inner monologue announced with a flourish. Plot device number 2. The novel's heroine has arrived. Right on cue. Look at him. That's not annoyance. That's a system shock. The male lead's entire world, his meticulously controlled emotional landscape, has just experienced a seismic event. He's trying to mask it with his default setting of glacial indifference. But the code is already rewriting itself. The story has begun. The new woman, whose name Lily would soon learn was Joanna Ning, was being led towards the HR corridor by a perky assistant. Lily saw her opening. The plot required it. A good plot device doesn't just observe, it facilitates. She intercepted Joanna near the silent, whirring copy machine, stepping into her path with a gentle but firm presence. Joanna startled. Why? Doe-like eyes blinking in confusion. Excuse me, Lily said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You're here for the junior analyst position, aren't you? Joanna nodded, clutching her portfolio tighter. How did you know? I know a lot of things, Lily said, leaning in slightly. A word of advice. For your interview, and for everything after. She gave a meaningful glance towards Nathan's glass-walled office. He pretends to be ice. A monument to apathy. It's a defense mechanism. A fortress built to protect a wounded heart. You see? Joanna's brow furrowed. I'm sorry. Don't be fooled by the cold shoulder. Lily pressed on, her eyes intense. The dismissive tone, the impossible standards they are tests. Classic tropes. He's challenging you. seeing if you're worthy of breaching his walls. The truth is, she delivered the line with the gravity of a prophetess. Mr. Sterling is already secretly, irrevocably, fallen head over heels for you. Joanna took a half step back, a nervous smile playing on her lips. Oh, I think there must be a mistake. I've never met him before. Of course you haven't, Lily said with a knowing nod. This is the meet cute, the inciting incident. He doesn't even know it himself yet. But his soul does. Endure the trials he sets for you. It's all part of the narrative arc. He'll push you away, but it's only to see if you'll pull him closer. Before Joanna could formulate a response that adequately conveyed her profound bewilderment, the HR assistant called her name. Joanna gave Lily one last, deeply unsettled look before scurrying away. Lily watched her go, a sense of satisfaction washing over her. The seeds of narrative awareness have been planted. The heroine is now primed. My work here is done. She returned to her desk, feeling the burn of several colleagues' stares. They probably thought she was insane. In a way, they were right. She was insanely committed to her role. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of spreadsheets and scheduling, the mundane mechanics of her cover story. Then, at precisely 4:47 p.m., the intercom on her desk crackled to life. Nathan's voice cutting through the silence like a shard of glass. Lily. My office. Now. The summons, she thought. The confrontation is imminent. To walk to his office was an exercise in theatrical composure. Every head in the open plan workspace lifted. Every pair of eyes followed her. She kept her back straight, her steps measured. She was not Lily, the secretary walking to her doom. She was a supporting character striding purposefully towards a pivotal scene. The office was as cold and imposing as its occupant, a vast expanse of polished mahogany and chrome, with a view that could make a god feel humble. Nathan wasn't at his desk. He was standing by the wet bar, dabbing at a dark spot on the front of his pristine white shirt with a napkin. He didn't look at her as she entered. Close the door, he commanded. She did, the heavy wood clicking shut with a somber finality. He finally turned to face her, his eyes unreadable, his expression carved from stone. He held up the stained portion of his shirt. A small, dark splatter of coffee marred the perfect white. This is unacceptable, he said, his voice a low rumble. I'm very sorry, sir, Lily replied, her tone perfectly modulated. I can call down to the concierge. They have an express dry cleaning service. It can be back within the hour. Nathan watched her. A long, unnerving silence stretching between them. He dropped the napkin onto the marble countertop. No, he said. You're not going to call anyone. He took a deliberate step towards her. You are going to take this shirt, go to the executive washroom, and you are going to wash this stain out. By hand. Lily's breath caught in her chest. For the first time, her internal narrative faltered. This was cruder than she'd anticipated, more blatant. The classic humiliation ritual, her mind supplied, scrambling to regain its footing. The powerful male lead asserts his dominance over the insignificant side character. It's a base, primitive display to establish the power dynamic before the heroine arrives to gentle his savage nature. It's pure, unadulterated trope. The analysis gave her strength. She was not a person being demeaned, she was a character fulfilling her narrative function. But this function, she decided, had its limits. She lifted her chin, her gaze meeting his without flinching. No, sir. The word, quiet but absolute, hung in the air between them like a guillotine. Nathan's eyebrows rose a fraction of a millimeter. It was the most emotion he had shown all day. What did you just say? I said no, Lily repeated, her voice calmer and steady. With all due respect, Mr. Sterling, my employment contract outlines my duties as your executive secretary. Those duties include managing your schedule, handling your correspondence, and facilitating your business operations. They do not, under any article or subclause, stipulate laundry services. She gave a small, almost apologetic shrug. It is outside the scope of my professional responsibilities. Checkmate, she thought. This plot device has read the manual, and the manual has an HR section. Nathan didn't rage. He didn't shout. He did something far more terrifying. He smiled. It was not a real smile. It was a cold, sharp thing. A baring of teeth that held no warmth, no humor, only a chilling, final clarity. He looked at her as if he were a scientist who had just finished observing a particularly bizarre specimen and was now ready to catalogue it and move on. I see, he said softly. He turned his back on her, walking with unnerving calm to his massive desk. He didn't sit. He simply stood behind it. A king behind his rampart. He looked at her one last time, his gaze sweeping over her, dismissive and final. It was the look one gives to an object that has ceased to be useful. He then picked up the sleek, black receiver of his desk phone and punched a 3-digit extension. His eyes never left hers. Helen, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. It's Nathan. A pause. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, wild thing trapped in the cage of her story. Regarding my secretary, Lily, he continued, his tone as casual as if ordering lunch. I'm terminating her employment. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The narrative she had so carefully constructed around herself began to fray at the edges, the words blurring and becoming meaningless. Effective today, he added. Send someone from security up to escort her from the building. I want her gone in 5 minutes. He placed the receiver back into its cradle. The click of the plastic settling was the loudest sound Lily had ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, the sound of an ending. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, she had no idea what he was thinking. There was no trope to decipher, no narrative arc to predict. There was only the cold, hard reality of his power and her sudden, shocking disposability. Her inner voice whispered, small and shaken, as the foundation of her world crumbled into dust. So this is the part where the plot device gets broken. The air in the boardroom on the 57th floor was as thin and cold as the view of the sprawling city below. It was a cathedral of corporate power. All glass, chrome, and a single, monolithic mahogany table that seemed to absorb all sound and warmth. Nathan Shen sat at its head, a statue carved from ice and ambition. His posture was impeccable, his custom-tailored suit a second skin, and his expression a carefully curated mask of indifference. Across from him, Chairman Wong, a man whose girth and ruddy complexion spoke of a life of excessive indulgence, beamed with the smug satisfaction of a predator who had cornered its prey. Lily, positioned slightly behind Nathan, was meant to be invisible. A secretary, a note-taker, a ghost in the machine. In her own mind, she was a plot device, a secondary character currently occupying a filler scene before the real drama began. She meticulously straightened the pens by her notepad, a focus absolute. The script calls for the male lead to handle this, she thought, her inner monologue a constant, running commentary on the narrative she was trapped in. My role is to look anxious, but supportive. Perhaps offer him a glass of water at a dramatically appropriate moment. The deal, for the exclusive distribution rights of a new green technology, was supposed to be a formality. Weeks of grueling negotiations, sleepless nights for Nathan's team, had culminated in a signed letter of intent. This meeting was for the final contract, the handshakes, the insincere smiles for the press release photos. Everything seems to be in order, Nathan, Chairman Wong said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He pushed the contract back across the polished table with a thick, bearing finger, stopping it just short of Nathan's reach. A fine piece of work, just one minor adjustment before we make it official. Nathan's jaw remained unclenched, his eyes unblinking. It was a terrifying stillness, one Lily had come to recognize as the calm before a storm. An adjustment? He asked, his voice low and smooth, yet carrying an edge that could slice through steel. A mere formality, Wong chuckled, leaning back in his chair, which groaned in protest. Market conditions have shifted. My board feels that our initial valuation was a touch conservative. An additional 20% on our share is all that's required. To reflect the new reality, of course. A collective intake of breath rippled through Nathan's side of the table. 20%. It wasn't an adjustment. It was extortion. It was a corporate shakedown. A blatant abuse of the trust established by the letter of intent. They were being held hostage, moments from the finish line. Lily watched Nathan's hand, resting on the table. Not a single muscle twitch. He was calculating, processing, preparing to unleash a torrent of controlled fury that would level the man opposite him. This is it, Lily thought, a flicker of excitement running through her. The male lead's big moment. He'll deliver a scathing monologue about honor and integrity, crush this greedy buffoon with his superior intellect, and secure the deal. I should prepare the celebratory champagne. Nathan opened his mouth to speak, the first syllable of a cold dismissal forming on his lips. I don't think that will be possible, Chairman Wong. The voice was not Nathan's. It was quiet, calm, and clear, cutting through the thick tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Every head in the room swiveled towards the source, towards Lily. She hadn't moved from her seat, her posture still that of a diligent secretary, but her eyes, usually downcast or lost in some distant narrative, were fixed on Chairman Wong with an unnerving intensity. Wong blinked, momentarily confused. He looked at her as one might look at a piece of furniture that had suddenly spoken. I'm sorry, he sneered. Did the coffee girl say something? A few of his underlings snickered. Lily felt a familiar, dull ache of humiliation, a ghost of past rejections. But today, it was different. Today, she wasn't just their Saishi, the delusional girl. She was a character with a purpose. A plot twist, her inner voice supplied. The disposable secretary reveals a hidden skill, a classic trope. The author must be feeling uninspired today. But I'll play my part. She met his dismissive gaze without flinching. I said, she repeated, her tone even and devoid of emotion, that an adjustment of 20% will not be possible. Nor is it legal. Wong let out a barking laugh. Legal, little girl. This is business, not a courtroom. We have a letter of intent, not a blood oath. Precisely, Lily said, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. You have a letter of intent, which, under the provisions of the Civil Code, can be constituted as a preliminary contract, especially when it contains all the necessary clauses for the main contract, which this one does. I made sure of it. She paused, letting the information settle. Nathan had gone completely still beside her, his gaze shifting from Wong to her, his mask of indifference finally cracking to reveal a sliver of stunned surprise. Lily continued, her voice taking on a professorial cadence. Specifically, Civil Code, Article 495. It states that if a party, after signing a preliminary contract, fails to conclude the main contract in breach of the preliminary agreement, they are liable for breach of contract. Your refusal to sign the agreed-upon terms unless we meet a new, unsubstantiated demand is a clear breach. Chairman Wang's ruddy face began to lose some of its color. The snickering from his side of the table had died. The penalties for such a breach, Lily went on, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, more menacing, are not insignificant. We would not only be entitled to sue for all direct financial losses incurred during the negotiation period including man hours, legal fees, and opportunity cost, but we could also seek damages for bad faith negotiation. The reputational damage alone would be severe. I imagine your investors would be quite interested to learn that Wong Corporation's business practices involve signing agreements and then attempting to extort partners at the last minute. The silence in the room was now absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the building's climate control. Wang's bravado was visibly crumbling, his piggy eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape route. This is preposterous, he stammered. Lily leaned forward just an inch, a subtle, predatory movement. She was no longer a secretary. She was an executioner. The script is getting good now, she thought with grim satisfaction. Time for the final blow, is it? She asked softly. Is it more preposterous than the irregularities in the funding for your West Side residential project? The one you secured with Councilman Zhang's enthusiastic support. That was it. The kill shot. Every drop of blood drained from Chairman Wang's face, leaving it a pasty mottled grey. His jowls trembled. The West Side project was his crown jewel, but it was built on a foundation of whispers and backroom deals. Councilman Zhang was his powerful, untouchable patron. To have his name invoked here, in this room, connected to this project, was to hold a lit match to a trail of gunpowder. Lily had spent the last 2 weeks doing more than just fetching coffee and scheduling meetings. She had read every file, every footnote, every piece of market analysis related to Wong Corporation. Driven by a deluded sense of duty to her story, she'd followed a breadcrumb trail of shell corporations and land permits that led straight to the councilman's doorstep. It was a detail she'd found, a loose thread she wasn't sure would ever matter. But the best plot devices, she knew, were the ones planted early. I don't know what you're talking about, Wong whispered, his voice hoarse. He was no longer looking at Lily, but at Nathan, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. But Nathan wasn't looking at him. His gaze was fixed entirely on Lily. The surprise had melted away, replaced by an expression of profound, unadulterated astonishment. He was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time, not as the eccentric woman foisted upon him by a marriage contract, not as the secretary who talked to herself, but as a brilliant, lethal strategist hiding in plain sight. Wang's resolve shattered. A misunderstanding, he blurted out, his hands visibly shaking now. A complete misunderstanding. My board, they were overzealous. The original terms are, of course, more than acceptable. I apologize deeply. He fumbled for a pen, his movements clumsy and panicked, and snatched the contract towards him. Where do I sign? The tension in the room broke, replaced by the quiet, scratching sound of a pen signing away millions. Wong pushed the signed documents back across the table as if they were contaminated. He looked utterly defeated, a deflated balloon of a man. He started to rise, eager to flee the scene of his own humiliation. Please, Chairman Wong, don't rush off, Nathan said. His voice was quiet again, but the icy authority had returned, magnified tenfold. Wong froze, halfway out of his chair. Nathan turned his head slightly and looked at Lily. The look he gave her was complex, a mix of appraisal, respect, and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. Lily, he said, his use of her name a deliberate, public acknowledgement. Please pour the chairman a cup of coffee. He looks a little shaken. It was a command, but it was also a coronation. He wasn't ordering his secretary. He was instructing his partner. Lily rose gracefully. The closing scene, her inner voice noted. A symbolic gesture of dominance, very well written. She moved to the sideboard, her hands steady as she poured the dark, steaming liquid into a porcelain cup. The aroma filled the silent room. She walked back to the table and placed the cup gently in front of Chairman Wong. The clink of porcelain against mahogany sounded like a gavel. Wong stared at the cup, as if it were poison. His gaze flickered up to Nathan, who was watching him with cold, predatory eyes. The message was unmistakable. You called her the coffee girl. You dismissed her. Now you will accept this coffee from her as a symbol of your submission. You will drink your humiliation. Sweat beaded on Wang's forehead and trickled down his temple. His trembling hand reached out, the expensive rings on his fingers looking gaudy and cheap. He wrapped his fingers around the delicate cup, his knuckles white. With a great, shuddering effort, he brought it to his lips and drank. Lily returned to her seat beside Nathan, her expression serene. Her duty as a pivotal plot device now fulfilled. She folded her hands on her notepad, ready for the next scene. She felt Nathan's presence beside her more intensely than ever before. He didn't speak, but in the charged silence of the boardroom, as their defeated opponent choked down his bitter coffee, she felt a seismic shift. The story was changing, and she was no longer sure she knew how it was going to end. The call came at 10:47 p.m. A jagged tear in the fabric of Lily's carefully constructed evening. She had been cataloguing her collection of vintage fountain pens, a quiet ritual that grounded her, when Nathan's name flashed across her screen. The ringtone, a sterile, default chime she'd assigned him, felt like a summons. Plot point activation, she thought, her fingers stilling over a mother-of-pearl Parker duofold. The male lead requires the plot device. Mid-narrative complication imminent. Lily speaking, she answered, her voice professionally placid. My office, 30 minutes. Bring the charcoal grey suit from the back of my private closet. The one with the silk lining. And the platinum cufflinks. Nathan's voice was a low rumble, impatient and devoid of pleasantry. It was the same tone he used to demand quarterly reports or dictate ruthless acquisition strategies. Understood, Mr. Shen. He hung up without the goodbye, of course. Goodbyes were for main characters with emotional arcs. He was the cold CEO. His abruptness was a core character trait. 25 minutes later, she was navigating the slick, rain-glossed streets of downtown. The garment bag, containing a suit that cost more than her car, was laid carefully across the back seat. She wasn't heading to the Shen Corporation headquarters, however. The updated location ping to her phone had directed her to a place called Nightfall Club, a name so perfectly on the nose for a dramatic confrontation, as she almost smiled. The club was a temple of understated wealth, hidden behind a discreet black door with no sign. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged leather, and unspoken power. The bass from a distant sound system was a physical pressure against her ribs, a low, predatory thrum. Men in tailored suits and women in jewel-toned dresses moved through the dim, unlit space like sharks in an aquarium. Their conversations a low murmur punctuated by the clink of ice in heavy crystal glasses. Lily, in her simple but practical black trousers and silk blouse, felt deliberately out of place. The humble secretary entering the lion's den, a classic trope to highlight the class divide. She clutched the garment bag to her chest like a shield and scanned the room. She found Nathan in a secluded alcove, seated in a plush velvet booth. He wasn't alone. A woman was perched beside him, her posture a masterclass in possessive elegance. She was stunning, with hair the color of liquid midnight and a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her laughter, sharp and bright, cut through the ambient noise, directed entirely at Nathan. Ah! Lily's breath hitched. There she is, the vicious supporting female. Chapter 12. Page 87. Entry Q. A shared laugh with the male lead to establish intimacy and provoke the heroine. Except, Lily reminded herself, she wasn't the heroine, Juliet Ning was. Lily was just the catalyst, the narrative tool. The woman's eyes, sharp and intelligent, flicked over to Lily. They narrowed instantly. A predator assessing a non-threat. Nathan. Darling, is this your delivery girl? Nathan's gaze met Lily's, his expression unreadable, a mask of cool indifference. Lily. The suit? Lily stepped forward, her movements precise. She ignored the woman, focusing solely on her task. As she unzipped the bag to present the suit, the woman leaned forward, deliberately placing a manicured hand on Nathan's forearm. "I'm Clara Vance," she said, her voice a silken challenge. Lily didn't need to look at her to feel the weight of her stare. "Nathan and I grew up together. We're practically family. Childhood friend." The most dangerous subtype of vicious supporting female. Lily's internal narrator supply. She wields shared history as a weapon. "A pleasure," Lily murmured, her focus on smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on the suit's lapel. Her job was to facilitate the plot, not participate in it. She was scenery. Clara was not accustomed to being scenery. She slid out of the booth, her crimson dress a slash of color in the gloom, and stood directly in Lily's path. "He didn't tell me he'd hired someone so plain." The insult was textbook, designed to elicit a flustered, emotional reaction. But Lily's mind was a flowchart. Insult delivered gives plot device, must show resilience or be humiliated, gives resilience, is out of character for a disposable secretary, gives humiliation, is the scripted path. "It helps me blend in," Lily replied, her voice even. "It's more efficient." Clara's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. "Efficient, my function is to support Mr. Shen's operational needs, not to be a decorative element. My appearance is optimized for minimal distraction." A flicker of genuine confusion crossed Clara's face before it hardened back into disdain. She looked at the suit Lily was holding, then at the glass of red wine in her own hand. In a movement that was too fluid to be accidental, she stumbled, her arm jerking forward. The dark red liquid arced through the air, splashing across the pristine charcoal grey wall. A collective gasp came from the nearby tables. Nathan was on his feet in an instant, his face a thundercloud. "Clara." But Clara's eyes were locked on Lily, alight with triumph. "Oh, clumsy me." Lily looked down at the ruined suit. The wine was spreading, a dark, ugly stain. It was a 5-figure suit. It was her responsibility. The logical human reaction would be panic or anger, but Lily felt a strange, detached calm. The wheels of the story were turning, just as they should. Conflict initiated. Escalation is next. That was a predictable narrative beat, Lily said, a voice quiet but clear. She lifted her gaze to meet Clara's. "But your execution was a bit heavy-handed. The accidental spill is overused. It signals your antagonistic role too early in the scene." Clara stared, her mouth slightly agape. "What did you just say to me?" "I'm offering constructive criticism on your performance," Lily clarified, as if explaining a spreadsheet. "For future reference, a more subtle microaggression would have been more effective in establishing your character's passive-aggressive nature." The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the comment seemed to short-circuit Clara's brain. The triumph in her eyes curdled into pure fury. You little freak." She lunged, not with a theatrical slap, but with a raw, angry shove. She pushed Lily hard, caught off balance by the weight of the suit. Lily stumbled backward. Her heel caught on the leg of a chair. She flailed, the world tilting in a dizzying slide of amber light and dark shadows. Her head connected with the corner of a heavy mahogany table with a sickening crack. The last thing she registered before the darkness swallowed her was Nathan's sharp, guttural cry of her name. The first thing she registered upon waking was the smell, antiseptic, bleached, the sterile, scentless scent of a hospital. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets. Scene change, the hospital. The catalyst event has concluded. Now for the consequences. A dull throb pulsed behind her eyes. A doctor was shining a penlight into her pupils. Nathan stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, his face carved from granite. The charcoal suit he was wearing, a different one, was rumpled, his tie loosened. It was the most disheveled she had ever seen him. Pupils are responsive, the doctor said gently. You have a concussion, Miss Lily, and a few stitches. We'd like to keep you overnight for observation. Lily blinked, focusing on Nathan. Is she here? Nathan's jaw tightened. Clara? No, her mother took her home. Good, Lily said, trying to sit up. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she sank back into the pillows. Then the timeline is proceeding as planned. The diagnostics will need to be run immediately. The doctor exchanged a look with Nathan. Diagnostics, we've done a CT scan. You're not for me, Lily interrupted, her voice gaining a strange urgency. For Clara Vance, you need to check her blood type and tissue compatibility, specifically for a kidney transplant. Nathan took a step closer to the bed. Lily, what are you talking about? Clara is fine. You're the one who hit her head. That's the point, she explained, her gaze earnest and alarmingly lucid. My injury is the narrative device that forces her into a hospital setting. It's here that a routine blood test will reveal she is a perfect match for the sweet heroine, Juliet Ning, who will be diagnosed with acute renal failure in Chapter 15. The vicious supporting female is contractually obligated by the plot to donate her kidney, a forced act of redemption that removes her as a rival for your affection. She paused, looking between the two stunned men. And while she's under, you might as well draw her blood for the transfusion the heroine will need after the car crash in Chapter 18. And oh, her eyes widened. The abortion. We almost forgot. The stress of the kidney donation is the plot's justification for her convenient miscarriage of the male lead's baby, which she falsely claimed was his to trap him in marriage. It's all very neat. You need to get the OB-GYN down here right away. Silence. Take. Heavy and deeply uncomfortable. The doctor looked at Nathan with an expression of profound clinical concern. Mr. Shen, the doctor said in a low voice, perhaps we should discuss your secretary's state of mind. Head injuries can sometimes trigger latent psychological episodes. Nathan didn't look away from Lily. For the first time, the IC control in his eyes fractured, revealing something raw and unsettling beneath. It wasn't just annoyance. It was a deep, consuming worrying that seemed to terrify him. He was looking at her not as an employee, not as a plot device, but as a person who was terrifyingly unwell. In another wing of the pristine hospital, Clara Vance was not fine. She was pacing the floor of a private waiting room, her fury a caged animal. That unhinged, delusional little nobody. She accused me of being a bad actress. Me. And did you see the way Nathan looked at her? He actually shouted her name. Clara railed, her hands gesturing wildly. I demand you sue her for slander, for assault. She fell into me. Her mother, Eleanor Vance, sat perfectly posed in a leather armchair, not a single silver hair out of place. She observed her daughter's tirade with the cool detachment of a biologist studying an insect. Stop being hysterical, Clara. It's unbecoming, mother. That creature is his secretary. He brought her to nightfall. He is clearly sleeping with her. After everything our families have been through, after all these years, he chooses some broken little stray over me. Eleanor took a slow sip of the bottled water on the table beside her. He isn't sleeping with her. How can you be so sure? Because Nathan Shen is not a fool, Eleanor stated, her voice as crisp as a winter morning. He doesn't mix business with pleasure, and he certainly wouldn't risk a scandal with an employee. His reasons are far more practical and far more permanent. Clara stopped pacing, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. What are you talking about? Eleanor Vance looked at her daughter, her eyes devoid of sympathy. She was a woman who dealt in facts, not feelings. And the fact was, Clara's emotional investment was a liability. It was time to cut the loss. Nathan Shen is not yours to have, Clara. He was never going to be yours. I told you not to get your hopes up. At the merger our families, the merger will proceed. Eleanor cut in smoothly. But the alliance doesn't require a matrimonial bond between our two families. The Shen family has already arranged one. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, hard to breathe. Arranged to whom? Don't tell me it's that insipid Juliet Ning. Eleanor gave a small, mirthless smile. It was a cruel, sharp thing. She leaned forward, delivering the final, devastating blow with surgical precision. No, not Juliet Ning. It's already been finalized. Nathan is engaged to another woman. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Who? She whispered, the single word brittle with disbelief and rage. Her mother's gaze was unflinching. To that secretary of his, to Lily. The sleek, obsidian shell of the sedan glided through the neon-drenched arteries of the city, a silent predator in a river of light. Inside, the world was muted, a bubble of expensive leather and hushed air conditioning. Nathan Shen drove with an economy of motion, his hands steady on the wheel, his profile a chiseled silhouette against the blur of skyscrapers. Beside him, Lily sat ramrod straight, her gaze fixed on her own reflection in the passenger window. Internal monologue. Chapter 32. Scene 4. The male lead's conveyance. A moment of quiet tension before the climactic banquet. The script dictates I remain observant and professional, awaiting the trigger phrase that will propel the plot forward. She clutched a sleek leather-bound notebook in her lap, its pages filled with her meticulous, almost frantic handwriting, a codex of her perceived reality. Lily. Nathan's voice was a low baritone that cut through the manufactured silence. He didn't look at her, his eyes remaining on the road. Tonight's banquet is critical. The final push for the waterfront development deal with Jia and Wong. Understood, Mr. Shen, she replied, her voice crisp and even. All preparatory materials have been reviewed. The gift packages are prepared as per standard corporate protocol. He made a sound, a non-committal hum deep in his throat. Standard protocol won't be enough. I need you to handle the presentation, and I want you to be generous. There it was. The trigger phrase. Lily's fingers tightened on her notebook. Analysis. Generous. A deliberately vague directive from the male lead. In the narrative structure of this genre, such a command is a test. It's an opportunity for the underestimated female lead to demonstrate either catastrophic incompetence or unexpected brilliance. The stakes are designed to be high. The potential for humiliation is immense, but the potential for turnaround is equally so. Standard corporate gifts: a vintage bottle of wine, a luxury pen would be a narrative failure. The term generous must be interpreted on a scale befitting a CEO of his stature. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Your instructions are perfectly clear, Mr. Shen. Nathan glanced at her then. A brief, sharp look. He saw the flicker of strange light in her eyes, the focused intensity that always unnerved and intrigued him in equal measure. She was already scribbling in her notebook, her pen flying across the page. He'd long ago stopped asking what she wrote in there. He'd learned that her peculiar methods, her bizarre internal logic, somehow produced results that were nothing short of miraculous. He had given her an ambiguous command because, deep down, he trusted her interpretation of it more than he trusted a detailed plan from anyone else. He turned his attention back to the road, a flicker of apprehension warring with a powerful sense of curiosity. The Imperial Grand Ballroom was a galaxy of glittering crystal and shimmering silk. A string quartet played Vivaldi in a corner, their music a delicate thread woven through the tapestry of polite laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. The air was thick with the scent of lilac and expensive perfume. Lily moved through the crowd with an unnerving placidity, a small, unassuming cog in a machine of immense wealth and power. She was dressed in a simple, elegant navy dress, a stark contrast to the jewel-toned gowns around her. She was not here to be seen. She was here to execute her function. Nathan stood with Mr. Chow and Mr. Wong, two portly, influential magnates whose partnership was the linchpin of his company's next 5-year plan. He was the picture of cool confidence, but his eyes kept scanning the room, searching for his eccentric secretary. Finally, the moment came. The formal presentations were over, and the air was ripe with anticipation for the schmoozing and gift-giving that sealed such deals. Lily materialized at Nathan's side, as silent as a phantom. She held two slim, exquisitely wrapped gift boxes. "Mr. Zhao, Mr. Wong," Nathan began, his voice smooth as polished granite, "a small token of our esteem and our hope for a prosperous future together." He gestured for Lily to step forward. She did, her expression serene, almost beatific. Internal monologue. The climax of the business subplot. The presentation of the offering. The male lead has given the stage to the female lead. This is the moment the disposable secretary proves her indispensability. The narrative requires a showstopper. She handed the first box to Mr. Zhao. "Mr. Chow," she said, her voice clear and carrying surprisingly well in the opulent space. "Shen Corporation values partners who build legacies. In recognition of that, Mr. Shen hopes this small gesture will help you with yours." Mr. Zhao chuckled, expecting a rare cigar or a limited edition watch. He opened the box. His chuckling stopped. His face went slack, his eyes widening as he stared at the contents. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was not an object, but a document, a thick, embossed cardstock portfolio. He lifted it with trembling fingers. On the cover, in gold leaf, were the words, "Deed of Title, the Lakeshore Villa." "No, 8, a gasp rippled through the onlookers who were close enough to see. The Lakeshore Villa was a legendary property, a sprawling architectural marvel worth a fortune. It wasn't a gift, it was an endowment. Before the murmurs could escalate, Lily turned to a similarly stunned Mr. Wong and presented him with the second box. "Mr. Wong," she said, with the same unnerving calm, "Shen Corporation appreciates forward-thinking vision. To support your future endeavors in the city, Mr. Shen wished for you to have a foothold." Mr. Wong fumbled with his box. Inside was a similar portfolio. "Deed of Title, Penthouse Suite, the Azure Tower." The Azure Tower was the newest, most exclusive residential building in the city, and the penthouse was its crown jewel. The collective silence in the ballroom was now so profound it felt like a physical weight. Jaws were literally agape. People stared, champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. He had meant a generous commission, a luxury car, a paid-for family vacation to a private island. He had not meant this. He discreetly pulled out his phone. A frantic flurry of alerts from his chief financial officer painted a terrifying picture. Two massive, 7-figure asset transfers, authorized by one Lily, using the executive discretionary powers he himself had granted her months ago in a moment of trust. His first instinct was a surge of pure, unadulterated panic. This was ruinous, this was madness. But then he looked up. He saw the expressions on the faces of Zhao and Wong. They weren't just pleased, they were utterly, completely overwhelmed. Their gratitude was monumental, their loyalty cemented not with a trinket, but with a life-altering act of largesse. He looked at the other business leaders in the room, their faces a mixture of awe, envy, and stark terror at the new bar that had just been set. And then he looked at Lily. She stood there, calm and posed, as if she had just handed out company-branded pens. A slow, incredulous smile began to spread across Nathan Shen's face. It was an expression so rare that those who saw it did a double take. It wasn't incompetence. It was genius. It was an act of such audacious, magnificent corporate theater that it would be spoken of for decades. She hadn't just secured a deal. She had mythologized him. In one move, she had made him a legend. Later, As the banquet began to wind down, Lily slipped out onto a deserted marble terrace for a breath of cool night air. The city sprawled before her, a glittering tapestry of dreams and ambition. Internal monologue. Mission accomplished. The business subplot has reached a successful conclusion. The male lead's reputation is enhanced. The female lead's competence is established. The narrative should now pivot back to the primary romance plot. I should have known you were behind that stunt. The voice was like acid. Lily turned to see Lee Hua standing in the doorway, a beautiful face twisted into a mask of pure venom. She was impeccably dressed in a crimson gown, a slash of color against the pale stone. But her elegance couldn't hide the raw fury in her eyes. Lee Hua was the designated villainess in Lily's narrative, the childhood friend of the male lead, destined to be his partner until the plucky heroine arrived. It was a spectacle. Lee Hua spat, advancing on Lily, crass, tacky, buying loyalty like some street vendor. But that's all you're good for, isn't it? Following his orders like a little puppet, Lily remained silent, her expression neutral. The villainess's confrontation, standard narrative beat. She will attempt to assert her dominance and belittle the female lead. Lee Hua stopped a few feet from her, her eyes scanning Lily's simple dress with contempt. He may have been forced into this ridiculous arranged marriage with you, but don't for a second think you've won. Nathan's heart belongs to me. It always has. She reached into her tiny, jewel-encrusted clutch and pulled out the thin envelope. She thrust it at Lily. Here, this is for you. A little bonus. For you to take a nice, long vacation. Disappear. Go back to whatever hovel you crawled out of and leave him to the people who truly understand him. Lily looked at the envelope. It was thin, barely thick enough to hold more than a few $1,000s. Analysis. The bribery attempt. A classic, if poorly executed, tactic by the antagonist. The proffered sum is insultingly small, designed not as a genuine incentive but as a demonstration of the villainess's perceived superiority and the female lead's perceived low value. Refusal is mandatory for character integrity. Lily didn't take the envelope. Ms. Hua, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. As the contracted wife and executive secretary to the CEO of Shen Corporation, my duties include the protection of company assets and interests. Accepting a bribe to abandon my post would constitute a gross dereliction of duty. Lin Hua's face contorted with rage. Contracted wife. Dereliction of duty. Do you hear yourself? You're insane. You live in a fantasy world. My professional obligations are not fantasies, Lily stated calmly. Your attempt at coercion has been noted and is summarily rejected. I would advise you to withdraw. That was the final straw. With a shrill cry of frustration, Lee Hua lunged. She didn't slap or scream. Her attack was more primal, her manicured nails raking for Lily's face. You little nobody. I'll ruin you, Lily, who had spent her life feeling like a character buffeted by plot points, reacted with the instinct of someone who had long anticipated such a scene. Internal monologue. The physical confrontation. The villainess resorts to violence when her machinations fail. The female lead must defend herself. This is not an act of aggression, but of asset protection. The primary asset being myself, as a key plot device for the male lead's narrative progression. She sidestepped Lin Hua's initial lunge with surprising agility. As Lin Hua stumbled, off balance, Lily brought her heel down hard on the instep of the other woman's expensive stiletto-clad foot. A pained shriek echoed across the terrace. Lin Hua staggered back, clutching her foot, her face a mask of shocked pain. This is tantamount to broad daylight robbery, Lily said, her voice still eerily level as she straightened her dress. Attempting to forcibly remove a key personnel member from their post. Enraged and humiliated, Lin Hua charged again, this time aiming to grab Lily's hair. Lily didn't retreat. She ducked under the grasping hands and, using the other woman's momentum, shoved her firmly. It wasn't a violent push, but it was perfectly timed. Lin Hua stumbled backward, tripping over the hem of her own gown and landing in a heap of crimson silk and indignation on the cold marble floor. It was at that precise moment that the terrace doors opened again. Nathan stepped out, his face a thundercloud. He had come looking for Lily, a strange warmth spreading through his chest, wanting to tell her he wasn't even sure what. That she was brilliant, that she was terrifying, that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Instead, he was met with the sight of Lin Hua on the floor, weeping with rage, and Lily standing over her, looking mildly inconvenienced, as if she were dealing with a jam photocopier. Nathan, Lin Hua wailed, immediately shifting into victim mode. Thank God you're here. This crazy woman. She attacked me. For no reason. Look what she did. Nathan's gaze flickered from Lin Hua's theatrical tears to Lily's calm, dispassionate face. He saw the faint red scratches on Lily's arm where Lin Hua's nails had connected. He saw the crumpled envelope lying on the ground. He saw everything. He walked past Lin Hua as if she were a piece of furniture. He went straight to Lily, his eyes searching hers. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low and laced with a concern that silenced everything else. Lily blinked, momentarily thrown off script. The male lead's intervention. He is meant to be angry, to demand an explanation. This deviation is unexpected. I am functionally intact, Mr. Shen. The asset is secure. A corner of his mouth twitched. The asset, he repeated softly. He gently took her arm, his thumb brushing over the scratches. His expression hardened. Without looking at Lin Hua, he spoke into his lapel. Security to the West Terrace. Escort Ms. Hua out. She is no longer welcome at any Shen Corporation event. Effective immediately. Lin Hua's wails turned to shrieks of disbelief. But Nathan didn't even flinch as the burly guards arrived and unceremoniously helped her to her feet, leading her away. The terrace was silent again, save for the distant city hum. Nathan still held Lily's arm, his touch gentle but firm. Lily, he said, his voice softer now. I don't know what story you think you're living in. Her heart stuttered. The confrontation of realities. He is going to call me delusional. He will fire me. The arranged marriage will be terminated. This is the tragic ending arc. He turned her to face him, his hands moving to her shoulders. He looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw not a cold CEO, not a male lead, but just Nathan. And he looked tired and overwhelmed and incredibly fond. I don't care what novel you think this is, he continued, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't pass. That you need to understand something. In my story, you are not the disposable secretary. You aren't just a plot device to move my story forward. He took a deep breath, the confession feeling like it was being torn from the deepest part of him. Lily, you are the story. Her mind went blank. The internal monologue, the constant narration that had governed her every action, fell completely silent. There was no script for this. The arranged marriage, he said, his grip tightening slightly, as if to anchor her. It wasn't just a contract to me. Not for a long time. Tonight what you did in there was insane. It was reckless, and it was the most brilliant thing I have ever seen. You aren't an asset, Lily. You are my partner. My indispensable partner. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. I am in love with you, he whispered, the words raw and true. Not a character in your book. Me, Nathan, I love you, Lily, in this world, the real one. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a scripted, dramatic kiss for a closing chapter. It was hesitant at first, then deep and searching and real. It tasted of champagne and night air and a future she had never dared to write for herself. When he finally pulled back, Lily was breathless, a carefully constructed world shattered into a million glittering pieces. In its place was something terrifying and beautiful and true. So, Nathan murmured, a genuine, warm smile finally reaching his eyes. What happens in the next chapter, Ms. Secretary? For the first time, Lily didn't have an answer. She just smiled back, a real, wavering, brilliant smile, and whispered, I think we write it together.